of these companies are maybe not solely relying on tape. They're using tape, as a supplement with their disk and their backup environment. But that is a lot of tape, so they use a lot of legacy technology. And then on top of all of this, data is growing very, very rapidly. And IDC is predicting that by 2020, we're going to be creating 40 zettabytes of data, which is just a staggering, almost incomprehensible amount of data that's being created. And just from anecdotally from the customers I talk to, a lot of them are telling me, my data footprint is growing 20, 40, 60% year over year. All of that data, a lot of that data is critical. All of it needs to be protected. The question becomes, how will you protect that data? And that's when a lot of organizations start to move forward and start thinking about cloud. So go to the next slide. Cloud, it becomes a story of, is it public cloud? Is it private cloud? Is it hybrid cloud? And the answer for a lot of organizations, it's not necessarily, just one or the other. Most companies are saying, look, I need to do a mix of public, of private, and try and sort of tune the dial and choose my business services based on, what makes sense for most organizations. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about how SteelStore, well, actually, Mark will talk in a couple minutes about how SteelStore enables that hybrid cloud, both on-premise data going to public or private, or and potentially both types of cloud providers, whether it's more of a service provider or the hyperscalers like AWS or Google. So why the hybrid cloud for backup and archive? Hopefully most of you have been following the news over the past several years and seeing that the cloud storage, public cloud and private cloud, the prices have been dropping really, really quickly. So if you look back at 2010, we saw the cloud storage prices were close to 20 cents per gig per month. So it wasn't the most compelling offer in terms of compared to what you could do on-premise. But over time, we started to see sort of a tipping point around this time last year when the cloud providers really started to drop their prices. And you can see that they've now converged, for the most part, around that 2 to 3 cents per gig per month. And I just have examples here of Azure, Google, and AWS. But of course, there's a lot of other providers on the market, and they're all very rapidly reaching this convergence point of that 2 to 3 cents per gig per month. And there's also what we call cold storage cloud providers like Glacier or eVault LTS2 is another one not pictured here, but those are ones coming in at 1 to 1.5 cents per gig per month. And that's when this the cloud storage pricing strategy really started to tip, and customers realized, wow, I can actually save a lot of money by going to the cloud. And it's interesting to see that a lot of them are actually choosing to first start with backup and archive for their cloud storage. Well, and ESG recently found that 44% of companies that are using cloud infrastructure are actually using it for backup and archive workloads. That's the most popular use case for cloud storage. A lot of reasons behind this. Maybe if you don't have any experience in cloud and you want to get started and dip your toe into the cloud waters, backup and archive might be a good, low risk, it's a low latency type of workload thing to get started with. And that's why we're seeing so much momentum in this space. Not only that, but there's another reason people want to start with backup and archive setting into the cloud, and it's because we see a lot of challenges with backup and archive strategies in many organizations. And so just to highlight a couple of the things that I'm seeing from many of your peers, the first thing that I hear over and over again is just backup and recovery can't keep pace with the requirements of the users today. So users expect instant recovery. They expect really no data loss. But a lot of times the legacy backup and recovery strategy that you might have put in place just can't keep pace. If you think about it, you might be using a strategy that you've had in place for decades. If it's grandfather, father, son type of backup to tape or even to disk, a lot of the time they can't meet the windows, and you might fail consistently to meet backup and recovery windows, especially as storage grows. So the next complaint we hear all the time is that backup and recovery is just too expensive. And then, of course, as data footprints are growing, the latest stat from Forrester is that they're growing 40% year over year. but your budget might be staying flat, which once again the data shows that's fairly consistent. How are you supposed to protect more data? Not only that, is getting data off-site can be really tricky if bandwidth gets more expensive, and then larger data sets require more bandwidth. But then the other side of expense is, of course, time. And this is something we hear a lot, is that employees are just spending too much time on data protection. They're spending too much time running the backup, and they want to organizations want to try and allocate these employees to maybe more strategic initiatives, to something that's really going to move the needle forward, and not have to spend so much time on backup, which is fairly tactical. And the last complaint that we hear quite a bit is actually that backup recovery is actually very risky. So if you're relying on tape, tapes can get lost. We hear stories about tapes falling off of trucks, or actually maybe never making it onto the truck, ending up in someone's car in their glove box. But actually, the other thing that people don't talk about enough, in my opinion, is that tapes are very hard to test. So you really need to be testing your recoverability and your recovery strategy pretty consistently. But if you're on tape, you're likely not doing that because it's just so incredibly time-consuming. And then, of course, tapes can also lead to more downtime and more data loss, because if you're not sending tapes off-site as frequently as you should, that will increase your RPO. And then, of course, more downtime because they take longer to recover from. So that leads us into SteelStore. And for that, I'm going to turn it over to Mark Robson to walk us through the SteelStore solution.
Well, thank you very much, Rachel. Again, my name is Mark Robson. I'm a senior solutions architect with Riverbed. For those of you who weren't aware, Riverbed was the initial creator of the SteelStore product, leveraging the deduplication technology that's existing in their LAN optimization appliances today. But we repurposed it towards storage. But Riverbed really is a storage company, so we found SteelStore a better home in the hands of NetApp, and we're really excited for this opportunity going forward. And so thank you all for coming. So NetApp SteelStore is a cloud integrated storage appliance that is very focused on the backup and archive space to securely and efficiently store data inside the cloud. Let's go into very, I'm having the same issue. There we go. Let's talk specifically how SteelStore works. It's actually a very simple solution to deploy. From what we call the ingest side, we're starting on the left of the slide. How SteelStore works is we first start by seamlessly integrating into existing backup and archive software that you're already using. On the left-hand side, you see a large number of popular names of the top backup providers in the market today. But the fact is that SteelStore works by delivering a NFS or SIFS interface to those applications. So even applications that you don't see listed here can still take advantage of SteelStore by leveraging that SIFS and NFS interface. That makes it very easy to integrate into your environment. That's how we make ourselves available to the backup software. Once the backup starts and data starts being ingested by the SteelStore appliance, we actually go through a very interesting process which compresses, deduplicates, and encrypts all of that data. And we do this all in line. So as that data comes in, we can compress, duplicate, and encrypt, assign policies based on those. So if there are certain data sets that shouldn't be compressed or deduplicated for compliance purposes, if there are certain data sets that shouldn't be encrypted, right, we can control that. Once that data makes it into the appliance, the very first thing we do is we write it to the local disk inside of the appliance itself. This local disk allows us to, A, provide a local cache for data recovery. So as Rachel mentioned, not only is backup an important part of data protection, but that ability to recover is important as well. So when I go to do my restores from a SteelStore appliance, any data that is still sitting in the local cache in a deduplicated format is actually delivered from that local disk and not even pulled from the cloud itself. So we'll talk a little bit about some of the long-term cloud solutions and how we can provide some additional cost savings. So again, we bring this data in. It sits on local disk in a deduplicated format. It is cached, and then it is immediately queued up for replication to the cloud. So all data that makes it into the SteelStore gets replicated to the cloud, so it exists in the cloud at all times. As you see on the right-hand side, there's a large number of public and private cloud partners that are specifically supported. The SteelStore uses a standard REST interface on the replication side. So any service using an S3, Amazon S3 interface, will likely work as well. This allows the SteelStore product to be as open as possible, both on the ingest side, as you saw with our SIPs and NFS, as well as the replication side through all of these specifically supported public and private cloud vendors, as well as the smaller ones that we can support through a standard S3 interface. The results, of course, are faster recovery because we have this data on disk. Reduced data loss because all data is protected inside the cloud. And I would encourage you to do a little bit of research on the individual cloud vendors themselves. But what you can achieve out of the cloud that you can't get out of tape is in some cases up to 11 nines of durability. And durability is important when we talk about backup and recovery as opposed to availability, because in terms of those long-term solutions, archiving and backup, it's not about how whether you can access that backup immediately, but how protected that backup is long-term for the protection of your company's information. So 11 nines of durability far exceeds what you can get in tape. In many cases, some reports have indicated that a tape recovery is oftentimes not even 50% in terms of durability, and we're looking at 11 nines in terms of the cloud. So let's take a look at the next slide. So the SteelStore appliances can be run in two modes. There's the backup mode and the cold storage mode. In the backup mode, we dedicate that local disk of the SteelStore appliance to storing as much cache information as possible. This is a use case that is very specific to the need for being able to back up and recover information very quickly. If our need here is only for archive, if we just need a long, deep storage for data, and we're not planning on doing a lot of recovery, needing the performance that we can get from disk, we can actually go into cold storage mode. And in cold storage mode, we dedicate that disk on the appliance primarily for metadata, and leverage that to maximize how much data we can actually store in the cloud. So you'll see in the case of the appliance configuration, a physical 3030 appliance, SteelStore appliance, can start with as little as 32 terabytes of usable local cache. That is the actual amount of usable space on the appliance, usable by your backup application. That 32 terabytes of cache, if deduplicated 30x, which is not too uncommon in a SteelStore environment, would allow you to store the equivalent of 960 terabytes of data in that local cache for use for recovery, and that in turn would allow for up to 28 petabytes, just over 28 petabytes of storage in the cloud. Now, to get that 28 petabytes, then you would obviously be looking at the largeable usable cache size, up to 192 terabytes of local disk. That would allow for 5.6 petabytes of local storage and 28 petabytes in the cloud. This allows for the longest possible retention and fastest recovery for the largest data sets. In cold storage mode, we only use the smaller 32 terabyte system, but we can store up to 5x the long-term cold storage data in the cloud. There is a virtual appliance. The virtual appliance is available for, in a read-only for disaster recovery purposes, allowing you to gain access to data backups that are stored in the cloud, even though the physical appliance may actually not be available. That being said, the SteelStore appliances are available in HA as well. They can replicate between each other, either locally in the same data center, or across your WAN to another data center using the same standard REST interfaces that we use to replicate to the public and private clouds that you're using for backup. So in terms of efficiency and security, there's a 90% reduction in time to deploy the solution. It's a very simple wizard-driven installation process that comes from the appliance. The cost in terms of the tape costs and hardware costs versus cloud and appliance costs are significantly lower, and the amount of data volume is reduced drastically. So 90% of data volume would only be a 10x deduplication factor. It is not uncommon for us to see 15, 20, or even 30x deduplication and compression over time in our backup sets. It's a very open solution. 95% of the cloud providers are specifically supported, as well as the large number of ingest options from a backup software perspective. In fact, you may have recalled from the previous slide, a couple of those were Oracle RMAN and Microsoft SQL Server, which themselves aren't backup software, but because they can dump, they have an internal dump capability, they can dump directly to the SteelStore appliance without even requiring specific tape backup software. We can also shrink recovery times from days down to minutes. Instead of having to recover tapes from off-site, bring them online, cross your fingers and hope that the restore is actually available. You can see your data at all times inside your cloud. You can recover that, and if that data is in the local cache, we can recover that data within a matter of minutes. In the next slide. So I wanted to highlight a couple of specific customer success stories that we've had, and there are several more. The financial services firm implementing SteelStore, they reclaimed 40 hours a month of their IT time, just eliminating the management of tape media, and allowed their IT team to focus on new strategies and systems. Their annual archive storage from moving from tape to cloud-based backup was reduced by 90%, and the deduplication on their data set they saw was 85%, which is about a 7 to 8x deduplication rate. In a separate case, a transportation company saved $2.4 million annually in data storage savings by leveraging the deduplication and lower costs of cloud storage to be able to provide their backup and archive data. They actually went through and tested and verified 24 to 34% increase in productivity, based on their ability to reduce the time and effort it took to manage their tape and recovery environments. So with that concludes the quick technical overview of the NetApp SteelStore appliance. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Mark, and thank you, Rachel. And next steps, if you would like to schedule a face-to-face meeting and meet with us to discuss the topic we discussed today, we would be happy to present you with a $50 Amazon gift card. Not bad to hear a little bit more and understand how the technology that Rachel and that Mark discussed today are applicable directly to your environment. So as you see on the screen here, you must make the appointment by the 16th of January, 2015, not 2014. And you cannot have purchased this solution from cStor in the past. And moving forward to the next slide here, just to give you a heads up for your schedule, on the 21st, which will be the next webinar Wednesday we have, the topic will be business continuity with cluster data on tap, featuring solutions from NetApp. So please do mark your calendars for that, and you see there's some additional information on where to find that on our website. You can also call us directly to 877-cStore81, select option 2. And everyone who joined us, we greatly appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedules. Thanks for making time and joining us. Happy holidays, and thanks a lot from cStore. Are there any questions at this time?